Hello friends, we're going to look at a really dark and depressing poem today from Shakespeare's Hamlet, a 1600s masterpiece tragedy. But of course our tragic hero is suffering through some really deep mental and emotional anguish as he tries to avenge his father's death. So we're going to look at that, and I'm sitting in a public graveyard here because he's talking about whether or not to stay alive, John Travolta style, but no, whether or not to really stay alive. So he says, and you've probably heard in a million puns before, to be or not to be, and he means to stay alive or to stop. That is the question, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. So part one, is it better to suffer through the crazy stuff that life throws at us? Fortune could be Fortuna, the goddess, spinning men around on this wheel of life, wheel of fortune. And we suffer through so many things as humans. Or to take arms against a sea of troubles. So sea of troubles being hyperbolic, like there's just so much difficulty, and by opposing in them. So he's just really trying to decide, like, is it better to keep going, or should he take action against his own existence? Which sounds kind of paradoxical, but Hamlet's really struggling with action and inaction in general as far as avenging his father's death, so that permeates his speech as well. To die, to sleep, no more. And by sleep, to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. So he does really want to die, or he wants a break from his troubles. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. There's the rub. So he's saying, though, that when we die, or that eternal slumber, then we go to the afterlife. And he's like, I don't really know what's coming, and that doesn't sound so great, so maybe we'll just stay right here for a while. There's the rub. He's like, that's the problem. That comes from a gaming term from a long time ago, an obstacle. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come? For when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, must give us pause. So when we've ended this life, we're going to go to an afterlife, and we've just really got to think about what that means. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time? So he starts saying, who would put up with all this terrible stuff? For example, the oppressor's wrong, like people who are over you that push you down. The proud man's contumely, the arrogant that push you down as well. The pangs of despised love are when people do not love you back and you love them dearly and you're in a lot of pain. The law's delay, or the procrastination of justice when you're waiting for it. The insolence of office or bad politics, the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy take, when he himself might make his quietest mate with a bare bodkin. In other words, people could just stop putting up with all this stuff with an unsheathed knife, which is, quite violent and terrible, by committing suicide. That is what he's talking about. Who would fardels bear, or who would all put up with all these loads, these heavy, heavy loads, to grunt and sweat under a weary life? But that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the wheel and makes us bear those ills we have and fly to others we know not of. So we just put up with things because of fear of death, because of fear of the unknown. The undiscovered country always reminds me of the Cormac McCarthy book, No Country for Old Men. But he's just saying that undiscovered country is the afterlife. Nobody comes back to tell you about, right? So it makes people stop and think. And again, he's worried about his own overthinking and his avenging of someone's death, his father's murder. Thus, conscience does make cowards of us all, or conscience slows us down and makes us not act. So keep in mind, again, Hamlet is a early modern tragic hero. He's not the ancient burly man who slays dragons and brings their heads back. He's a thinking man. He's somebody that's worried about the soul and not just the body's triumph. Thus conscience does make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution, or the natural resolve, is sicklied over with a pale cast of thought, and enterprises of such pitch and moment, or such height and importance, like pitch being the height that a falcon can fly. With this regard, their currents turn awry and lose the name of action. So then he pauses and is interrupted when his beautiful girlfriend, Ophelia, walks into the room and they have a terrible fight. So this is, again, super depressing, but Hamlet is really debating, to act or not to act, beneath and within this speech about to be alive or not to be alive, because he's turning so much of that angst from other factors just on himself. So I hope you're not feeling like Hamlet, or if you are, to get some help, and we will try to read some happier poems in the future. But that is what Hamlet is talking about: to live or not to live, to commit suicide or not to commit suicide, to act or not to act, to be or not to be. All right, so thanks, friends.